Dogworks Radio is sponsored by Alaska Dog Works. Check out their website at alaskadogworks.com.
Start your day tomorrow with The Daily Dog with Michele Forto, the morning podcast on Dogworks Radio. Apple Podcast reviewer Patty Christensen calls it funny, smart, and filled with all the info I want to know about dogs. I love this show. Wake up with The Daily Dog, available on Dogworks Radio on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your shows.
You are listening to The Daily Dog with your host, Michele Forto. The Daily Dog offers training advice, tips and tricks, and maybe even a book or movie review, too.
Hello and welcome, everybody. It's The Daily Dog with Michele Forto. On last Friday's episode of The Daily Dog, we discussed the fathers of modern-day learning theory, which we use every day in the training of dogs. Their names were Charles Darwin and Thomas Huxley. If you haven't listened to that episode, pause right here and go back and listen. We will be here when you get back. Today, we are continuing our journey and talk about three more people that help shape how we understand how dogs learn. They are Pavlov, Thorndike, and Watson. Many attribute the beginning point of modern theories of behavior to Ivan Pavlov. He lived from 1849 to 1936. A Russian physiologist and Nobel Prize winner, Pavlov studied digestion in dogs. While conducting this research, he observed his canine subjects salivating before the food was presented. Pavlov reasoned that his dogs were displaying this behavior in response to either the presence of his lab assistants or the sound of the door opening. Pavlov then conducted a series of experiments where he rang a bell just prior to feeding his canines. After a number of trials, the ringing of the bell by itself elicited the reflective salivation of the canines. This phenomenon became known as Pavlovian or classical conditioning. Pavlov has succeeded in taking a reflective action and putting it on cue, thereby creating a conditioned reflex. This new science became known as respondent conditioning and was an important predecessor to modern operant conditioning. Respondent conditioning and conditioned reflexive responses explain why a dog begins to salivate when its owner begins the feeding ritual. The understanding of this type of conditioning can enhance a trainer's procedure. Most training procedures are indeed built upon the principles of operant conditioning, which will be discussed in greater depth in a later part of this series. Respondent conditioning, on the other hand, is most useful when trying to change a dog's behavior. Some examples might be habituation, counter-conditioning, systematic desensitization, and flooding. These principles will also be discussed later in this series. Edward Lee Thorndike lived from 1874 to 1949, studied the effect different consequences have on behaviors. Thorndike is known for the law of effect, which simply states that responses or behaviors that produce pleasant rewards are likely to increase in frequency. This law is the foundation on which operant conditioning is built and is the predecessor of all the treat training now being advocated in modern dog training. Thorndike's experiments were being conducted in the United States near the time that Pavlov's dogs were salivating in Russia. J.B. Watson lived from 1878 to 1958, has been credited as the father of modern behaviorism. A psychologist who worked at Johns Hopkins University as well as the University of Chicago, Watson emphasized the need to move the study of behavior away from the concentration on thoughts and feelings towards a more scientific, experimental study of behavior. Watson is best known for his Little Albert study in which he and his colleague R. Rayner conditioned a fear reaction in an 11-month-old boy named Albert. The study went like this. Initially, Albert was allowed to play freely with a white rat. Then, a loud noise was presented whenever Albert reached out and touched the rat. The noise was loud enough to startle Albert. In 1 week, whenever the rat was presented, Albert would cry even without the noise. He also generalized his fear to other things, including a dog, a rabbit, and a Santa Claus mask. Watson used respondent conditioning, in this case the startle reflex, to modify Albert's behavior. This will be a multi-week series on the influential people in learning theory and the dawn of modern dog training. Thanks for listening to The Daily Dog, and remember, we are sponsored by Alaska Dog Works.
Did you know that Alaska Dog Works trains service dogs for those in need throughout North America? Each and every service dog that is trained through the Lead Dog Service Dog Program and Michele Forto and her team has an individual training plan. We train for autistic, mobility, psychiatric, and PTSD for our soldiers for service work. If you know of someone that may need a service dog, please take a moment and check out Alaska Dog Works on social media and at alaskadogworks.com.
Hi guys, it's Alex. If you're a fan of sled dog sports and the Iditarod, Mushing Radio is the show for you. Each Wednesday we drop a new episode on Dogworks Radio, so be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts from.
If you like our podcast, there are a few things you can do. You can take a couple of minutes and go to Apple Podcasts and leave us a 5-star review. You can also check out all of our Dogworks Radio sponsors and promotions in our show notes. Another thing you can do is go over to Facebook, like our Facebook page, and one last thing, please tell all of your friends by spreading the word about Dogworks Radio. Thank you so much for listening to us. We really appreciate you.
Dogworks Radio is produced by Robert Forto. Logo art by Angry Squirrel Studios. Dogworks Radio is produced in conjunction with KVRF 89.7 in Palmer, Alaska.
For dog training advice, you can contact Alaska Dog Works at 907-841-1686 or visit their website at alaskadogworks.com. If you have a show idea or would like to be a guest, please contact us by sending an email to live@dogworksradio.com.